Hi guys, I am a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe, and so for today's video I'm going to be listing my top 5 favourite short stories of his and my top 5 favourite poems by Poe. So everything I've read of Edgar Allan Poe's I've read from this book here, which is called Edgar Allan Poe Collected Works. I haven't read everything of Poe's. I've read all of the poems that are in this collection, and I have read the majority of his short stories, but I am going through this book very slowly because I am just dreading when I finish it and I can no longer reach for Poe and read something new. So I am going through it very, very slowly. I've also got this book too, which I have never actually read from, but I love the cover. I think it's gorgeous, and the black sprayed edges as well. I have got a video on this channel where I do a day in my life inspired by Edgar Allan Poe, where I do show a small collection of Edgar Allan Poe stuff I have. So I'm going to start by listing my top 5 favourite short stories from Poe, and so starting at number 5, I've got The Pit and the Pendulum. The story is about a prisoner of the Spanish Inquisition, and the story explains his experience of being tortured. The story inspires fear in the reader with its heavy focus on the human senses, and that's what really happened to me when I was reading this. I don't get scared that easily with scary stories or films, but Poe stories I just find chilling. Really, his words and the way he writes, and this was one of the stories that when I first read it I felt like I was the prisoner and that I was trapped, and just throughout reading it I just wanted to know, am I going to escape? Am I going to get out of here? I just thought it was a very powerful read. At number 4, I've got The Murders in the Rue Morgue. This has been described as the first modern detective story. It is about this man who is solving the brutal murders of 2 women, and he finds clues that suggest the killer is not human. When I was reading this, I was just hooked because I just wanted to know who did the killing, especially when he discovered that the killer could not possibly be human. I remember it giving me chills, and then I just wanted to know who did it. I just found it a very entertaining story. Now, with my next 3 favourite short stories of Poe's, I will be including spoilers because these are the ones which I really want to talk more about. A lot of people would have read these stories. They're some of his most well-known stories. So at number 3, I've got The Black Cat. This is about a man who suffers from alcoholism, and at the start he has this real love for animals. But as his alcoholism worsens, his temper becomes violent, and he ends up gouging out the eye of his black cat after it bites him. And then later on he ends up murdering the cat after becoming frustrated that the cat now fears him. He later finds a similar cat, and he ends up developing a hatred for this one too because it reminds him of the cat he had killed. So he attempts to kill this cat as well, but then his wife stops him, and so he ends up killing his wife, and he bricks up his wife behind this wall. Then later the police come round, and while the police are there, they suddenly hear this shrieking sound from behind the wall, and when they break down the wall they find the corpse of the man's wife and the black cat who the man had accidentally bricked in the wall as well, and it was the cat who had alerted the police. I think that this story is another creepy read which I found just very disturbing but also compelling. I again really wanted to know what was going to happen. I think this was the second of Poe's short stories I read because I knew it was one of his most well-known ones. It really is a classic. If you haven't read it, I definitely recommend reading it because even with me just spoiling the story there, it still gives a powerful emotional read, and I just love its memorable ending as well. At number 2, I've got The Mask of Red Death. This story follows this prince who attempts to avoid this dangerous plague known as the Red Death by locking himself in his abbey along with many other wealthy nobles. And during their party, this mysterious figure appears who is disguised as a Red Death victim and slowly takes the lives of everyone in the abbey. And I just really liked the message that Poe was given in this story, that no matter how wealthy or important you are, you cannot escape death. I also found this one another powerful read that gave me goosebumps when I was reading it. What I really love about Poe's writing is that when I'm reading it, sometimes if I'm reading it out loud, I'm forced to speed up as the story goes along. As the story intensifies, I feel like his pace grows faster. I find that with, for instance, his poem The Raven and also The Telltale Heart. I just found this another gripping story, and I have reread this a lot since reading it, I think for the first time last year. This story I actually read a lot later than some of his other short stories for some reason, and now it has quickly become one of my favourites of his and one of my most read short stories by Poe too. And at number 1 I have by far my most read short story of Poe's, and that is The Telltale Heart. This is another one of Poe's classics. I think it's probably this one and The Black Hat are probably his most well-known short stories. So in this story, the narrator, he becomes fixated on this old man's eye. He ends up growing this real hatred for it, and he just wants to rid himself of the eye, which means taking the life of the old man. And through the story, he talks about this perfect murder, but he ends up going mad from hearing the beating of the old man's heart under his floorboards. And like what I was saying with the last story, when I'm reading this, I'm forced to speed up at the end. I just love it. I find this story so powerful. I especially love the beginning and the ending. They're my two favourite parts of the story. It's only a short story. It takes me about 15 minutes to read, and I have read some of the story before on my channel, but I think I'm going to just read a little bit to you now. I just have to. I just love this story so much. I've got this little, I don't know what you call this thing, it's like a stringed bookmark, and I always have this set of the poem The Raven, and I always wish that I had two so I could find Telltale Heart easily as well. To be honest though, I should just memorise the page number 284. I don't know what's just happened to my lighting now, but I've turned ghostly white. True, nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken and observe how helpfully, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. I did put together a video retelling that story a few years ago, which was some of the clips you just saw there. I also made a short video on The Raven as well. I really enjoyed doing those videos. I may consider making another home movie sometime on one of Poe's other stories, though I'm not sure which one because some of them may be a little hard to make a video on. Sorry, my battery has just died, so if the lighting has changed again, it's probably because of that. My battery always dies when I am mid-recording. It's very annoying. I'm now going to be listing my top 5 favourite poems from Poe, although I am guessing you already know my favourite poem. I have said it a number of times on this channel before. At number 5, I've got A Dream Within a Dream. This poem is about hopelessness, loss, and the illusion of reality, realising that important moments in life are short and uncontrollable, and questioning whether everything that we experience is just a dream within a dream. At number 4, I have the poem Alone. This poem is about loneliness, isolation, and difference, being an emotional outsider who feels and sees things differently from others. At number 3, I have the poem The Bells. This poem is about different sounds of bells representing different stages of life, starting with joy and ending in sorrow. I really love this poem. I remember first reading it and it giving me my classic goosebumps I get from reading some of Poe's work. Whenever I'm reading Poe's work, I really do go through the emotions. He has such a powerful way with words, and I just think this is a very clever, simple poem really, but also very powerful just by explaining the different sounds of bells. At number 2, I've got one of Poe's most famous poems, and that is Annabel Lee. It is about a tragic love where the narrator mourns the loss of this woman called Annabel Lee. I can understand why this poem is so popular. It's another one of my most read poems by Poe. And at number 1, easily at number 1, it's not just my favourite Poe poem, it's my favourite poem ever, and that is The Raven. The Raven is about this grieving man who is visited by this raven that drives him to madness. The poem explores themes of grief and death, and it's because of this poem which is why I am a big fan of Edgar Allan Poe. I do remember first hearing this poem very, very clearly. I remember just putting it on just to have it playing for some background noise. I was just curious to hear the poem really, and I had to stop what I was doing and listen to the poem properly again and again and again. And I've listened to it so much I can recite the poem off by heart. I remember when I first got into the poem, it was becoming a bit of an obsession. I was reading it at least 4 times a day. That's how much I loved this poem. I was hooked. I just find it so lyrical, so beautiful to read, especially out loud. I always find I prefer reading Poe's work out loud more than in my head. And yeah, I'm so glad that I discovered this poem and through it Poe and all of his other amazing work. Thank you very much for watching this video. Please let me know if you're also a fan of Poe, and I will see you in my next video.
Be that word our sign of parting, bird or feeder shrieked up starting, get thee back into the tempest and the night's Bretonian shore, leave no black plume as a token of that life our soul hath spoken, leave my loneliness unbroken, quit the bust above my door, take thy beak from out my heart, and take thy form from off my door. Quoth the raven, nevermore. And the raven, never flitting, still is sitting on the plaided bust of Pallas just above my chamber door. And his eyes have all the seeming of a demon's that is dreaming, and the lamplight over him streaming throws his shadow on the floor. And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore.